Good afternoon, everyone. This is Betsy Kenny. I'm here with Lynette Panucci and Meg McNiff and Michael Tracy Ireland. We all work for the Office of Early Learning at the New York State Education Department. We're really grateful that you're here with us on this Friday afternoon. 5 minutes ago it was snowing here in Albany, and now the sun is shining, so I guess that's a good sign for us in this webinar this afternoon. We're going to focus mainly on program requirements and fiscal requirements today. We were going to talk about quality as well, and then we realized there was so much information coming at you all at once over the airwaves that we're going to have a subsequent webinar coming up soon that really speaks to quality and the quality assurance protocol that you received information on this week. You'll notice that the chat box on your lower left screen of your computers, you can chat. You all have chat privileges. Please be aware that whatever you write in the box will be seen by everyone. Spelling doesn't count this afternoon, so it's more important for us to hear from you than to worry about your spelling. Questions, thanks for sending questions ahead of time to us when you registered for the event. We're going to try to fold most of those into this webinar presentation. If you have burning questions you need answers to, please put it in the chat box. We'll do our best to answer them today, and if we can't, we'll follow up with everyone on any questions that need further investigation or prompting. Also, we're going to stop a couple times during the webinar to make sure that we have time for you to ask questions or pose your questions. So what I would encourage you all to hold the questions and make sure that you're hearing what we need to say to you, and then we'll follow up as we go along to make sure everybody's on the same page. Also, just so you are aware, this webinar is being recorded and archived. So if you're unable to join or you have a coworker who you wish could be on today and they're not, we'll be sending out the link to the archived webinar next week. So with that, I'm going to be quiet for a little while, and Lynette's going to talk to you about some of the program requirements for this statewide universal full-day pre-kindergarten, very complicated grant that we're so grateful that you got started in a big hurry and you're helping kids and serving kids and families, and that's what counts most. Thanks.
Hi everyone, this is Lynette, and indeed our story for statewide universal full-day pre-K began with last year's governor's budget. And Governor Cuomo's budget included funding for this program, and as all governor's budgets, that's tied to some laws that we need to familiarize ourselves with. So this actual funding is mentioned in Chapter 3 of the laws of 2014. And $340 million were appropriated for pre-kindergarten grants. And we're going to go through all of the program requirements today, step by step, slowly enough, hopefully, that you'll all absorb the information, and slowly enough that if you do have questions, you have a moment to either type them into us now or reflect on them a little bit, and then you can always submit some questions to our OEL mailbox. So let's get started. The purpose of this grant was twofold. Unlike pre-kindergarten grants in the past, this grant had two main purposes. One was to look at innovation and creativity through competition, and that involved a big focus on program quality. And the other piece of the pie was to convert new full-day pre-kindergarten placements into full-day with this money, or to create brand new full-day placements underneath these program requirements. So again, the focus was full-day and high quality. So the governor's office made $340 million available for these pre-K kindergarten programs across the state. $300 million was allocated to the New York City region, and $40 million was allocated for the rest of the state. And this was done in a brand new, innovative way that tied funding to teacher certification. This next bullet is extremely important. This is what you applied for. This was the method that awards were made, and this is also the method that we are going to use to reimburse you for your program for this first year. So let's take a close look at these bullets at the bottom. If the classroom teacher of record, and that is the teacher who is teaching on a daily basis in the pre-kindergarten classroom, holds a teaching license or certificate valid for service in the early childhood grades, each pupil in attendance for a full day amount of time, 5 hours or more, will accrue $10,000 in funding. If the teacher of record is not holding this teaching license or certificate, there is a lower amount that's accrued per pupil, and that's $7,000. So now the next piece of the pie is what happens if you are using your money to expand an existing half-day slot. All districts have a pre-K allocation amount, and that is what is deducted from the $10,000 or the $7,000 to make up for the additional half-day time that the child is attending. So again, you'll see these numbers coming up over and over again in your reporting information, and we'll talk about them again through the webinar. But $10,000 for certified teachers, $7,000 per child for classroom teachers of record that do not have certification. Other program requirements that are listed for this grant fall under Chapter 56, Part CC, Section 1 of these laws that we referred to. And there are many requirements for this particular grant for the awards that have been allocated out to you folks, and we're going to go through them step by step. So the very first one has a lot to do with the title of the program. It's a full-day program. So each program must provide instruction for at least 5 hours per school day for the full school year. That full school year is 180 days on a calendar between July 1st and June 31st of the following year. And because it's a 5-hour-a-day program, this also is going to impact the other UPK regulation about feeding children while they're there. We had a few questions already about what do we do about meals and snacks. Because they're there for a full day, you must serve a meal as well as your snacks. So that meal that we would commonly think of being served is the middle of the day meal, lunch, and then many districts are using the option to serve breakfast as well, and then of course snacks that would follow in perhaps the middle of the morning or the middle of the afternoon. Facilities that provide this program must also meet the applicable fire safety and building code requirements of whatever agency is licensing the program location where the children are housed. So again, we're looking at quality and we're looking at full day. And speaking of quality, this grant, as the priority pre-K grant that was part of last year's governor's budget, is very focused on quality. There are 8 program quality standard areas that we are going to spend a lot of time talking about in a separate webinar, but they are listed here for you so that we can take a brief look at them today. The first program standard area is curriculum, followed by family environment, materials and supplies, family engagement, staffing patterns, teacher education and experience, facility quality, physical well-being, health and nutrition, and the last area is partnerships with nonprofit, community, and educational institutions. We know this webinar was long and that we would have a lot of information to share with you, so our goal is to have another webinar focused only on these program quality standards in the upcoming weeks. So stay tuned for that, and we'll keep you posted via our email system and our website. Another important piece of this particular grant is this very important message at the top of this screen: supplement, don't supplant. Many districts over the course of the past 20-some years have been running pre-K programs of all assorted varieties. They might have a universal pre-K program, they might have a district-funded pre-K program, they might provide pre-kindergarten activities for some of their children for a longer period of time than some of their others, And what the whole goal of this program is that the funding from our statewide universal pre-K grant is to be used to supplement activities and program slots, but not to supplant or replace them with the money that comes from this grant. So again, supplement, do anything you can to increase what's happening within your district or your programs, but you can't use this particular grant funding to replace something that you've already done in the past. Big important words, and we will be checking in when we do our end of the year reporting as well as our data collection to make sure that these supplantations are not happening. Staffing is another important requirement of this particular grant, and because we're looking at high quality, we want to make sure that pre-kindergarten teachers that are providing instruction all possess a teaching license or certificate valid for service in early childhood grades. Now, pre-kindergarten teachers who work for nonprofit organizations or libraries or museums, they need to have a bachelor's degree in early childhood or a related field, and then they need to have a written plan to obtain their teaching certification within 3 years. And so for those teachers who are hired on or after March 31st, 2014, they have 3 years to work from moving the process of having their bachelor's degree to getting their certification. And for teachers that are hired prior to March 31st and no later than June 30th, 2017, they need to have, by that time, they will need to have their certification for their employment. So again, this is a push. It's a little different than our UPK regulations, which gives teachers 5 years, but the push is for high quality with this program, so we really want to move folks along to getting their certification within a 3-year period. These pre-K plans are very similar to what districts have used for universal pre-K. We're looking at, where are they attending, what kind of courses are they taking, how is the administration checking up on whether or not they're moving forward in their education process. And those folks that are teaching in charter schools that are employed by charter schools, they need to follow their charter school laws for their certification. So those are our very specific requirements that come under the law for 2014. Everything else that we follow for our statewide universal full day for requirements comes right from our universal pre-K regulations, and this little bullet just refers to where we can find those. Those are part of section 3602E of education law, and we can find them in our regulations, which are 151-1, and those are posted on our UPK website. And you can go to those anytime you want to refer to them. Simply sign in. The little address is down at the bottom at www.p12.nysed.gov and go right to the UPK page. And the regulations pop up on the left side of the page, and you can click on the link. And those will lay out the rest of the program requirements that we're going to talk about next. So again, if you want to see these written out in form and you want to make a copy for your teachers or anyone else you work with, they're easy to find. Just use the address at the bottom of the page. So, as like in UPK, all teachers that work at a CBO site, we want to move them towards certification. But if they don't have certification yet, then they must have an education director located at that CBO. And that particular education director, who's in charge of working with the teachers, must have New York State certification, and they must be there during the hours that the pre-K program is in operation. This education director certification could be either in early childhood education or in childhood education. And that's the difference between our birth to grade 2 certification or our nursery school to grade 6 certification. So either one is fine for our on-site early childhood directors. Like our universal pre-K program, all students that participate in our statewide universal full-day universal program must be 4 years of age by December 1st of whatever given year you're running the program. So for this year, they had to be 4 years of age by December 1st, 2014. And many times, as folks know, we run into situations where we have many more applicants than we do slots for our children in our programs. When that happens, every child must have an equal opportunity to participate in these programs. So therefore, the school district or the agency must establish a process to select these children on a random basis. So simply meaning they actually do a lottery. They put all the children's names in a hat, in a booth, and whatever, and they pull out the number of children's names that actually correspond to the number of slots that they have. Class size is another requirement for pre-K here in New York State. We have a maximum class size of 20 students. And that is indeed the maximum class size. It doesn't mean you can have 21 or 22 or 24 students by adding extra teachers. It means the maximum class size is 20 students. For those classrooms that hold 18 students or less, there must be one teacher and one paraprofessional present during classroom time. And for classes of 19 or 20 students, there must be one teacher and two paraprofessionals assigned to each classroom. Children who attend pre-K or universal pre-K in New York State are considered new entrants to the school districts because it's the first time they are actually registering within the district to, oh, how did I do that? Registering within the district to, hang on one sec, we've got a problem with our slides in the right order here. There we go. Registering the district. So those children must be screened as stated in our regulations. And those screening tools provide a look at where the child are at that point in time. And the screening is to determine if the children are possibly gifted, if they're possibly a child with a disability, or if they're possibly a child who needs support because they're an English language learner. All of the awardees of this grant must be responsible for choosing their own screening tools. And a little hint that I might want to give you is that a screening tool is not a tool that you're going to use over and over again throughout the course of the year to determine what kind of progress the children is making. Screening tools are actually those that provide a snapshot of where they are at one particular time in their development, and then you can sort of take a look at, do they need any other supports? We also need to do some assessment of our pre-K students. And most importantly, we want to do assessments because we want to know, are kids making progress? Are we providing the kind of programs and activities that are helping them learn and develop? So first we want to establish a baseline and sort of take a look at where are they at the beginning of our school year. And we want to make sure that these are valid and reliable measures. And our regulations state that we need to assess 3 areas in particular: language development, cognitive development, and social emotional development. And the data that we gather from doing our assessment of our children should help us to not just look at our children as individuals, but also to inform us to see, are we providing the right kind of instruction for those children. I'm sorry, our slides are, I don't know how that happened. It's just, they're moving without me. But I do want to mention that there is a great resource out there, and it is a book. And it's called Early Childhood Assessments, Why, What, and How. And it's been produced by the National Research Council, and it was written in 2008. And those the materials that are in this book. It's a nice fat book, and it looks at assessing children from birth up through kindergarten. But it's a great resource because it actually provides some sample assessments and what they, certainly what they are actually supposed to assess, so that if you're looking perhaps to assess cognitive development and you don't really know what materials to use, this is a great resource. And also try to remember that we assess children in an informal basis every day. We make notes of how are they interacting with their peers, what kind of language development are they using, how independent are they becoming, and those are very important as well when you're doing assessment of children. So you have informal assessment and formal assessment, and a great way to inform your instruction is to look at both of those together. Sure, I'd be glad to repeat the name of the book. The book is one more time called Early Childhood Assessments, Why, What, and How, and it was produced by the National Research Council, copyright date of 2008. The other thing that we require for our New York State full day, I don't know why this is happening. I have a magic wand here. It's moving without me. Is we really want to look at program quality as it pertains to our facilities, so where our programs are housed. And the goal is to provide ongoing technical assistance to promote high-quality programs. So there will be at least 2 visits a year, one to inspect the program quality and one to inspect the facility quality. And you may have already received some information about this, but SED is contracting with the Professional Development Institute for a lot of this work. And PDI, which we commonly refer to them as, are a subdivision of CUNY from New York State, from our City University of New York. And there will also, again, as I mentioned earlier, be an upcoming webinar to discuss program quality and this quality assurance profile that we'll use on our site visits. And now we can finally get to this slide that it keeps wanting to go to. We do want to take a moment to talk about data collection. All of you, wow, I am really sorry. This is just crazy. All of you heard me say that, remembering that $10,000, $7,000 piece about keeping track of our teachers and how many children are enrolled with them. This will actually be what we're using to do our enrollment snapshot on January 15th. So you have already received a letter that came from the Office of Early Learning, and if you didn't get one, please feel free to let us know that. You can email OEL. And the letter tells you that we are going to do an enrollment snapshot on January 15th. Now what that means is you're going to look at how many children you have in your program on that date. And you're going to count for us, literally. How many children are there with a certified teacher on January 15th? How many children are there full day with that certified teacher? And how many children have extended days with that certified teacher? And if you happen to work with teachers who are not certified, you can do the same thing. How many children are enrolled with teachers who are not certified yet? And how many are there full day? And how many are there for an extended day? In other words, they were enrolled in UPK or another program first. We will collect this data back at our office on February 27th. We will send you the little survey that you'll use to actually do this counting next week. And we'll discuss the reporting for this again a little later on in the webinar. So again, the snapshot date. And so it's like a little mini, for those folks who have done counting for Beds Day, it's like the little mini Beds Day for this statewide universal full day program is January 15th. It doesn't matter what your counts are on January 14th. And it's not going to matter what your counts are on January 25th. It only matters what the counts are on that day. And we'll talk a little bit about it again in just a few minutes. Now, any questions? And we have one that came in. Do pre-K students need to be screened before kindergarten? Well, a screening should really occur at the moment or prior to their entry, because it's a screening, it's not an assessment. We want to see if they need support during their program time. So screening should be done upon entry to the program. I hope that helps answer the question. So yes, it would definitely be done before kindergarten. Okay, and it looks like we have lots of questions down in the chat box, so we will definitely do a written Q&A, meaning we will take the questions that you're submitting, we will answer them, and we will send them back out to you. Okay? All right, thank you so much. We're going to turn this back over to Betsy now, and we're going to go through, okay, the next part of our program.
Hi, everyone. Lynette, thank you. That was very informative even for me. I'm relatively new to the Office of Early Learning, and I'm learning every day, as I'm sure you are too, as we go along through this very complicated yet important grant. So we're going to switch gears now a little bit and talk about money matters, because clearly in this grant, money matters. There are a lot of nuances. The issue of being paid late in the year. So we're going to go through slowly, step by step, talk about forms, talk about the method of data reporting and how that affects your funding. The questions in the chat box are excellent questions, and so to reiterate what Lynette was saying, we will go back, gather all the questions if we've missed some, which we have, do a written Q&A and get that out to you with when we send the link for the webinar, which is archived. So who deals with these statewide universal full-day pre-K dollars? A lot of folks here at the State Education Department and around the state have a hand in making sure that we have fiscal responsibility and the dollars flow from this agency through the governor's office, by the governor's office, to us, to you, from the Division of Budget, to the Office of the State Comptroller. There are all sorts of offices that are involved in this process. Our office, the Office of Early Learning, just so that you are aware, we administer over $750 million a year in pre-kindergarten program funds. We have the Universal Pre-K, Targeted Pre-K, which is a smaller pre-K opportunity, the Priority Pre-K grant, which is the governor's initiative, and the statewide Universal Full-Day Pre-K. We also oversee voluntarily registered nursery schools, and we've recently won a new federal award, and we'll be working with 5 targeted districts on that award, the Federal Preschool Development Expansion Grant. So we are busy here, but the exciting thing is more and more children are being served across New York State. Another program office we deal with and you'll deal with when you're submitting forms and budgets is the Office of Grants Management. When you're submitting your budgets and amendments, they come directly to the Office of Grants Management and then are processed on to us. Fiscal offices here at the New York State Education Department include the Grants Finance Department. They process grants budgets, their amendments, final expenditure reports. They try to issue timely and accurate payments. They do. We know that the payments for this grant are unique, and I'll talk about those in a few minutes. Any truly fiscally related questions, you can call them directly, although you're welcome to call us first. Here, I'm putting this closer to my mouth. I see that my microphone is not clear. I'm hoping that's better. Please let me know. And contract administration. For those of you who have grant contracts, that would be the CBOs. We work with the contract administration unit, and you should be. Those contracts are starting to roll out the door now. I'll talk a little bit about those in a few minutes, so be on the lookout for those. And then ultimately, the Office of the State Comptroller has to approve this procurement as well as the contracts, and they have ultimate fiscal oversight of all payments and processes. So there's a lot of moving parts to get the money out the door and to make sure that we're all moving together in the right direction. There are 2 mechanisms for funding awards. There are grants, which include the school districts. We have 53 school districts involved in this grant. 52 of them are around the state, and then the huge City School District of New York, the New York City Department of Education has a grant with us. We also have 26, are we at 26 now, CBO-led grant contracts. Grant contracts include community-based organizations, colleges and universities, research foundations, and for-profit entities. And with that go the two different mechanisms for awarding funds, and they are different. For grants, and I'm going to get into the minority women in business enterprise later, but once you all had to submit and have approved the MWBE package and paperwork before your grants could even move out of our office. And thank you to the hard work that you've done for that. Things are rolling along. Once MWBE is approved, the budgets are approved and processed through our office, the program office. And then they move on to Grants Finance Department, where they are ultimately approved and the grant award notice is generated. Grant contracts, for those of you who are community-based organizations, not-for-profits, those folks that I talked about just a minute ago, once your MWBE is approved, your budgets and your program narratives come here. We approve those in the program office, and then we send the budgets and the program narrative to Grants Finance, and we say these are ready for contract development. Then they go on to the contracting office, or Office of Contracts, and the contracts are developed. When the contracts are developed, this process takes a while, and this is what you're going to be seeing those, and this is for those of you who are CBO or not-for-profits, not the school districts, but everybody else. They go from our office. Once the contract comes to you, it requires several signatures and notaries. Then it comes back to us, and it will move through our Office of Counsel, onto the Attorney General's office, and ultimately on to the Office of the State Comptroller for final approval. So it has to kind of go all around Albany before it comes back to us with the high sign saying, okay, let's go. And at that time, once the fully executed contract is fully approved by the Office of the State Comptroller, you'll get a copy of your contract along with the grant award notice. So we had some folks ask questions when you submitted your questions about allowable expenses. There are many different program components for which expenses are required and necessary and allowed. Obviously, professional and paraprofessional salaries, support services, that can be your partners and your vendors. Professional development, we encourage you to invest in professional development. Materials and supplies, books, cots, things that you need to make sure that your classrooms are fully stocked and at optimum learning capacity for kids. Transportation services are allowable. They're not aidable, but they are allowable. And leasing expenses or other facility expenses are allowable. Again, not aidable, but allowable. It's really important to remember that no parent of a child participating in this program should be subject to a fee or charge for the program. Universal Full-Day Preschool and UPK are free to folks who have their children enrolled in the program. There's some critical questions that you should always be asking when you're going to spend money, when you're going to ask us if you can have certain allowable expenses, what's allowable, what's not. And the first is it necessary? Is it necessary to have, we need cots. Can we buy cots for kids? Well, you know, they lie on blankets on the floor. There's a really nice warm floor. We have great carpeting. They're very safe. It's fine. Versus if we need cots because we're on a cement floor, it's a slab, it's freezing cold, our children need to be up off the floor, we need cots. Then it's necessary. Yes, it's necessary. Is it reasonable? Can you buy, what are those, sleep number beds and, you know, Barca lounges and all that stuff? Obviously, no. But is it checking costs, following your agency bid process or your spending process? Find your cots. Is it allocable? This means if you are in this, for instance, if you are in a space, you share space with a Head Start or another locally funded program, and your program uses the cots in the morning, the kids rest from 11:30 to 12, and then the COTS are wiped down, they're put into a common space, and then your neighboring program uses those same COTS from 12:30 to 1. Is it allocable? Allocable means, are you sharing the cost? We pay 50%, you pay 50%. So all three of these criteria, they have to be considered for proper and efficient performance and administration of state and federal funds. And we're going to ask you those questions when you ask us for certain expenditures. Is it necessary? Is it reasonable? Is it allocable? And finally, is it authorized? Meaning, are you asking us ahead of time? Do you need to ask us for every book that you purchase? No. But always remember, when you, if ever you have a question, you think, I wonder if this is allocable, or I wonder if this is authorized, call us up. Start with a phone call. We're here for you. We try to be accessible. You can email us at oel@niced.gov. You can call us, and there'll be lots of contact information at the end of this webinar. So please, please call us and ask us questions, and don't, because we'd hate for, in the end, when you do your final reporting, to say, nope, that wasn't allowable, not allowable, not allowable. So let's front load those questions and make sure that we keep you on the right track fiscally. Just another mention of fiscal efficacy and how to keep things on track at your end. Have regularly scheduled meetings for your program office, for your program office and your fiscal office. If you're a small CBO entity, you should never be both of those things at the same time. There should always be a check and balance. You should have someone else, an objective person doing your budgets, so that you are making sure that you stay in compliance. Monitor your spend down. Even though that the monies are not flowing right now, you should have a separate accounting system for this grant and be monitoring what you wrote originally in your grant proposal and paying attention to your spend down. And be sure to follow your agency rules for the bid process. If you have to purchase things, make sure that you're following your agency rules for that. These programs have to be separately accounted for, or these monies have to be separately accounted for, not commingled with other funds. And in the case of a school district, funds must be maintained in expenditures made from a special revenue or special aid fund. So just be sure that you are paying attention to this. And also, in following the rules for the bid process, you always need to keep in mind the MWBE compliance regulations. Those are not going away. So I'll talk more about those in a few minutes, but just be mindful of that. I'm going to get into the fiscal forms a little bit. For those, some of this may be review for some of you in the school districts, and new for some of you who are new to working with the State Education Department. So we'll just go through them each one by one to make sure that everybody's on the same page and understands all of our forms and what needs to be on them and what's required. So the FS20 proposed budget summary, that was the budget that you submitted with your original application. It's an annual proposed summary of the money that you're going to be spending. It's broken down by codes: the total for professional salaries, the total for support salaries, the total for purchase services, the total for supplies, etc. You're not breaking those, you were not required to break those down into one FTE at certain amount of hours, paid annually is this. We didn't have to get into the weeds with your budget. That was for your proposal. Starting next year, we will no longer use FS20s. We'll be using FS10s, which I'll talk about in a minute. But even though you're just doing summaries on this FS20 for this year, you are required to submit budget amendments. And I'll talk a little bit about those in a few minutes and how they relate with the MWBE. So just be aware that FS20s, if you've been keeping that form on your desktop, you're not going to need it anymore. It's not going to be required or allowed in future years. So the FS10 is what we're going to be using from here on out. That's the annual proposed plan, expenditures that align with program goals and objectives. You submit it to grants management. You don't need to worry about that right now. This is just the flow. It moves from our office. We approve it. We disapprove. We'll call you and say, I'm not sure why you asked for this. This is a detailed budget. This is where you're going to break down not how many pencils you buy, but your supplies, your various vendors. You're going to list everything that you're going to spend in the course of a year. So going forward, you'll be using the FS10 annual budget. And every year you have to submit a new budget. make sure that it's signed. We're all about the blue ink here. We haven't started accepting electronic signatures. So anytime you send your fiscal forms, please send them signed in blue ink by your Chief Administrative Officer or properly authorized designee. Budget amendments. We've already started receiving budget amendments. That's where you want to change. For this year, you have a subtotal of professional salaries, and you want to move some money from professional salaries, let's say, into supplies. So you're going to decrease your professional salaries, increase your supplies. For this year, I would encourage you to call us or ask us questions for any budget amendment, and do it before, because we hate for you to do all this work and then us get here and say, no, this isn't going to work. So please feel free to call us at any time and say, this is what we're thinking. Can we do this? How does it work? And let us help you through that process. They're required, absolutely required, for any increase in a budget subtotal by more than 10% or $1,000, whichever is greater. Any personnel changes, number and type. Not the people, we're changing. Lynette isn't going to be the teacher anymore. Now it's going to be Meg. But it's, we have one, we wrote in our grant for one FTE teacher, and now we have to add another because we're going up. Or we need to add another teacher's teaching assistant. We need to know about that. Any minor remodeling expenses, any equipment expenses, we need to have those amendments. And they need to be submitted before making those changes to the budget, not after. This is a critical piece, and this is where people get, sometimes their costs are disallowed because they didn't ask us. They just went and made those changes, and then we have to say, I'm sorry, those changes were not allowed. So ask us before. Call. And changes in the budget are probably going to mean changes to your MWBE approval. So we'll talk about that in just a minute. Again, just more information on amendments. This year, and Meg is very happy because May 15th, 2015, 5/15/15, very symmetrical and easy to remember. Budget amendments are due by 5/15/15. We even looked it up, and it falls on a Friday. So after that, because remembering that amendments have to be approved before the spending is done, we want to make sure that, if you get into June, it's too late to spend those dollars. So May 15th, 2015. Call us. Just remember, communicate, and submit them to grants management. And all those contacts will be at the end of this webinar. Okay. So some of you I know, I admit, I confess that sometimes when I'm webinars I do multitasking, or I step away, or I'm asking everybody to kind of listen with 2 ears now because we're going to get into the nitty-gritty about your money. I have a question. Let's see. What should they use for a budget amendment if fewer students than anticipated? Timeline for budget amendments. So we talked about the timeline. What should you use for a budget amendment? We'll talk about students. Again, that's a question. If you have fewer students, and I'm going to get into that about how you're going to be paid and how your money is going to flow based on your enrollment. So I'll get to that in just a few minutes. Okay, everybody listening? This is the tricky part. So FS25, please speak into mic. I'm going to be eating the mic. I hope that's better. I'll hold it right by my mouth. I think I'm a loud talker, but apparently I'm not. So this is from the law and from the RFP. And don't panic, and I'll talk it through with you. Up to 25%, FS25s, that's what you use for drawdown to request your money. Let's just get that out on the table. So up to 25% of a school district's and/or eligible entities' awarded funds will be made available in the final quarter of the school year in which the services are provided as an advance on subsequent school year liabilities. This results in state funds first being made available as soon as April 1, 2015. What does that mean? We are all under it sounds like we've been messaging that April 1st you'll be able to get 25% of your funds. You will. But they're going to be based on, that will be an actual, in real time, real life, that's an advance for the 2015-2016 school year. when you submit your final report at the end of June, you will actually be receiving 100% of your funds for the program year 2014-2015. By the end of the summer, you should actually have 125% of your money. It's very confusing. So current year funds of a school district and their eligible entities awarded funds will be made available after June 30th, 2015. Once we look at the FS10F, which I'll talk to you about in a few minutes. So it sounds crazy and worrisome. People are, well, we know that many of you districts can move money between general funds and make sure the money keeps flowing. Many of the, some of you CBO-led grantees, you're anxious. We know you have bridge loans. It's been difficult to have the money to operate a program without any funds. It's written in the law, it's written in the RFP that was the plan. So I just want to be clear with you. If you're going to get some money in April, it's up to you. If you have to pay some things, you need to work with your accounting firm. But all those monies, by the time you submit your FS10F long form for the 14-15 school year, 100% of your money needs to be on that long form, not 75% of your money. That 25% is for next year. Meg is looking at me and making faces, and I know it's confusing, and I'm going to write it out for you all and use some examples. So, but just so you're aware of that. And I'm going to loop back to this. I'm going to talk a little bit about reporting more, and I'll use some examples again about your funding in a few minutes. So sit tight, and we'll make sure that we can be clear through this. Okay, I'm going to talk about reporting now. Oh, it's so Friday. So to reiterate what Lynette said earlier, your data is going to be reported. Your kid count is as of January 15th, 2015. That's your enrollment. Any students who are enrolled on January 15th, 2015, that's the count that will determine your award ceiling for the 2014-2015 program year. So if your target was 40 children, and on January 15th you had 37 children enrolled, you're going to be paid based on 37 children for the 2014-2015 program year. You're not automatically getting all of the funds that were awarded to you last fall. Also, it's important to note that we had some questions. If you had students who were enrolled and then they left and you refilled those slots, can you count that slot twice because the kids were there but then they went away? No, you can't. It has to be your enrollment as of January 15th, 2015. And this data, by law, will also determine your award ceiling for the 2015-2016 program year. Meaning if this year you report 37 and you're paid for 37 out of 40 children, and once we get your reports back, your MVPS, where you're reporting all this data, we will reuse your grant calculator. We'll do a whole calculation. We'll be in touch with you to let you know what your award ceiling is. But that award ceiling for this year will be the start for your award ceiling next year. And this data, the MVPS, the information that you're giving us, the reporting that you're doing that's due the end of February, it will also determine the amount of your 25% advance payment to be submitted in April. So we'll be in touch with each of you individually to go through this, to talk about your maximum funding, your funding ceilings for this year, your funding ceilings for next year. And once we get all of our data points reviewed, we'll be communicating with each one of you individually. There probably are some questions. I'm trying not to look because I get really easily off track about if there are available funds next year. We aren't sure at this time. We realize that if we don't hit the maximum funding for this grant, there may be a surplus of funds. We don't know at this time. Explain ceiling. Maximum. Ceiling means maximum. The maximum award. Like you hit the ceiling, you can't go any higher. So in essence, this has a hard ceiling, this grant, but no floor. So ceiling means maximum award amount that you could get. So that leads us to, as I mentioned, the FS10F final, your long form. And I encourage you all, if you have not dealt with forms, fiscal forms through the State Education Department in the past, please now go on and print off the FS10F long form to see how detailed it really is. It's where you are going to be entering every check, every journal entry that you spent on this grant. So look at it now. Make sure that your accounting system is in line with what's going to be required at the end of the year. It would just make your life so much easier. It's very detailed, and we'll be looking for that. It's submitted directly to Grants Finance, not to our program office. Don't worry about that now. And it has to be submitted. These are state funds, and with state funds you have 30 days to close your books after the end of the program year. So the program ends July 30th. You have until, I'm sorry, back that up, June 30th. Program ends June 30th, and July 30th is when these FS10F long forms are required. Once the long form is approved, 100% of your actual expenditures based on that January count and the number of students served and all those grant calculations I talked about a few minutes ago will pay you those program funds. So you will have already received your 25% for 15-16, and then over the summer you should get the max, all of your funds for this most recent program year. So just reminders about forms, submit them all, make sure you target due dates that you're on time. We'll keep poking you to make sure that that happens so we can help you get your dollars in the most efficient way. Make sure all the proper information is on there. Your contract number, for those of you who are CBOs, you'll have a contract number. You'll see it when it comes on your contract. And the project number for this grant always begins with the 4 digits 0545. It's a 10-digit grant number. Just be aware, if you're looking for a project number, it's that number, 10-digit number that starts with 0545. Talking about where to send the reports and forms. If you don't know, you can always send them to our program office and we'll get them where they need to go. Promise. Use the forms on the Grants Finance website. It assures the most current use of the form, and I have those links for you in just a few minutes. And make sure that you use that blue pen and it's signed by the right person. So okay, so let's just go back. Minority, Women in Business Enterprise, the requirements. Each year you have to submit a new MWBE compliance package with your budget. Your budget will not be approved until your MWBE compliance package is approved. And you also have to maintain MWBE compliance throughout the year. And this is coming into effect now. I've had to reach out to some folks. And Leila George, I saw your email. I haven't gotten back to you yet, but I saw it. I'll get back to you first thing next week. When submitting budget amendments, you have to review your original MWBE costs to see if any goal amounts have changed. If you're moving money from professional salaries into supplies, that may affect your MWBE. Call us up, ask questions. We've heard that Marisa Boomhauer here at our office has been very helpful. We continue to work closely with her. If the goal amounts are going to change, you're going to have to resubmit the whole MWBE package. So all the more reason to look at your finances now. Think strategically about any amendments you do. In theory, when you write your first year budget, you know exactly what you're going to spend. In reality, that never happens. But going into year 2, you'll have a better sense of how the dollars should flow. So the fewer amendments you can submit, the better, just because every time you submit an amendment to us, you'll have to submit a new MWBE package. There's your contact information for MWBE, and we're happy to help you through that process or direct you to those who can. Just a note to the not-for-profit entities who had to register as a New York vendor through Grants Gateway. Be aware, it's important that you go in, log in periodically, and check and see how your document vault is looking. Because if it says, and this is really critical, these are some of the status indicators. You're all found by this time, hopefully. Document modifications may pop up, and once you're pre-qualified, you have all been pre-qualified. The key thing to look for is if you go in and you see that your document vault says that it's open, many times there's some confusion. Folks think, well, somebody's in there looking at my documents. What that means, anytime any of your required documents expire, meaning you need to update them, you need to go in, it's going to open your document vault. So anytime you see that your document vault is open, and again, this is just for the not-for-profit lead entities here who are signed up through this and have been pre-qualified, you need to go in and check it around and see what it is. There's usually a little red X by whichever document needs to be updated. So just be aware of that. So, Grants Finance, this is a critical website you should all make note of, and go in now and see what's there. You are responsible to understand the guidance and information, all the announcements, everything. Even though it's just complicated in pages and pages, ultimately it's your responsibility to understand the reporting and the guidance and this grant and this law so that you can execute your grant with fidelity. There's just more about electronic payments. You should all be receiving your money electronically. If not, you need to, I think that was a requirement of this grant. If you have questions, there's how you reach out, and the Grants Gateway and Vendor Responsibility. More resources. Again, back to Grants Finance. And if you want to email them, they're responsive. It's grantsweb@niced.gov. Their mailing address, telephone. And again, we're going to archive this and record it so you'll have this information. And ultimately, if ever you have a question, reach out to us at the program office and we'll get you steered in the right direction. Grants management. This is us, our office, the Office of Early Learning. We're working really hard. We've recently increased our staff loads, our staffing, and so we're trying to keep our website up to date. We've just recently sent out a newsletter, which we hope will be helpful to you. Our plan is to do that quarterly and keep everyone in the loop. So this is our contact information. Please don't hesitate to reach out to us. Okay, so that's a lot of information. We nailed it. 2:30 on the dot. We were hoping to finish up in about an hour. We're happy to take questions, but we will be doing, I've seen the scroll for the information in the chat box. It's been going along pretty continually. We will be doing a written Q&A and getting that out to you soon. I do have one question about okay. We're writing the question so I can answer it. Wow. Okay, Meg, 180 days, lots of questions. Don't know if you want to speak to this. I'm reading your question right out loud, but that's okay because there is, in order to receive funding for this grant, there is a 180-day requirement to have programs. So if your program, we'll talk more about that. So does that mean you had to have full enrollment on day one? No. If your program was open and operating and you were getting started and you had one child enrolled and you were moving toward full implementation, you have met the 180-day requirement. Do children enrolled in UPK programs have to be residents of the district of the UPK program? I think yes. And I'll ask Lynette, and I was going to ask Lynette to talk quickly about the SIRS when they're capturing the data for MVPS, which will be coming out. So I'm going to turn my mic off and let Lynette talk to you about that and finish up the day.
Okay. I hope everybody can hear me. As you know, I had some trouble with my computer here. It does things on its own without any buttons. It's kind of scary. Anyway, first let's talk about SIRS. SIRS is the Student Information Repository System. And for those folks who are listening who are our agency folks, this does not apply to you. This is our district information recording system. And every year there's an opportunity for a certain number of people in every district to record enrollment numbers in our SIRS program. So as it applies to universal pre-K, we have always done a count in our SIRS system. Our statewide universal Pre-K program, which is this new program that you are all awarded funds for, is not actually part of SERS. But there's some nuances that go along with that. If the children that are attending your newly funded full-day program were funded for part of their day with Universal Pre-K funds, then those children are counted in SERS. They are UPK children and need to be coded as UPK children in the SERS system, and they're coded based upon where they attend their classes. So they could be UPK children attending classes in the district, or UPK children attending their classes in Head Start or in a local child care facility, or whatever those codes are. If you are using your full day universal funds to create brand new full day slots, those children that have brand new full day slots are coded in SERS as what we refer to as 990s, other pre-K kids. It means you're using funding other than the traditional allocational universal pre-K funds to help give these children their programs. So statewide universal funds are not counted in SERS unless they extend an existing day of an existing UPK kid. And I know it's very confusing, and we are working very hard. Dee Dwyer is our brilliant woman in the office who goes through SERS every year and does a head count for every single one of our 440 plus programs. So we know who you are, and we'll reach out to you individually if we see a problem with your data. So hopefully that answers that question. Betsy, you okay with that?
Yes, very okay. Thank you. We're having a lot of questions about the 180-day requirement. So a student had to be enrolled in UPK elsewhere to be counted on SERS. I'm still not clear. We'll reach out to you, Jennifer, or you can reach out to us individually and go through these. And as Lynette said, we'll be talking with everybody. When your reporting comes in, we're keeping track of you and want to be as helpful as we can. We can't get to everybody right now. Can I use Lynette's microphone? Here, I'll turn it back to Lynette, and I just want one more question that we asked about the 180 days, about going into the summertime. So let me turn this back. A program year is July 1 through June 30th. That's your fiscal year, that's your program year. So you need to build in those days by June 30th, but I'll have Lynette say that again through her microphone.
Okay, so I hope everybody heard Betsy say that. So your fiscal year for this program, even though it was a rush to get folks started, goes from July 1 to June 30. So all of your 180 days need to be counted in that window. So if you don't meet 180 days by June 30, then there's a problem. But think about this. Think about first, when was your real start date? Did you open your doors? It doesn't mean your classrooms had to be full. So if you had a couple children trickle in, maybe your start date was actually a little earlier in the calendar year than you actually thought of. So go back and really look at when you started enrolling children. And the other thing is, when we think about a 180-day school calendar, we also think about built-in vacations. You know, many districts and agencies have time off around the holidays in December. Some have time off around holidays, you know, in the spring. Some take a break in February. Maybe there's a way to do some programming during those normal breaks for your preschoolers so that you can make those 180 days. So I would, before you panic too much, I would really take a good look at your calendars, see what you can do to be flexible and think out of the box, because I know in my discussion with individuals, it was very easy to get to the 180 days. You just needed to think a little outside the box. So I would encourage you all to do that. And also to reach out to us. Remember, our number is 518-474-5807. You should have that ingrained on your forehead. And if you need to reach out to us, by all means, give us a call. We're here to help. I think we've always been able to, talk to the folks who really need us. Be persistent. Sometimes it's busier than other times in our office, and sometimes we're out in the field actually working with real people. So by all means, give us a call or send us an email. And as I see, we've got some other questions. If we haven't heard about our MWBE application, what are our next steps? Yeah, call us up. Because you're logged in here by name, we don't always know exactly where you're coming from, and our issues about MWBE are usually assigned to us by district name. So we would be able to get back to you quickly if we knew, what your program name was and so on. So again, reach out to us, send us an email, give us a call. We'll make sure that the recorded version of this is posted and available for your use and review, and we'll also plan to talk with you in the near future about those program quality standards. All 8 of those standards we'll discuss in detail. So thank you so much for giving of your time, especially on a Friday afternoon. And okay, and if you want to keep sending in your questions, we'll sign off the audio piece of this. And if you're feeling frustrated because there's a lot of people submitting questions all at the same time, we'll leave this up and running for a few minutes so all the questions can be recorded, and then we'll do a Q&A doc and get it back to you. So again, thank you for your time. Have a great weekend. Enjoy your Monday off that many of you have, and we'll stay in touch. Thanks again.